I still remember my second exam ever at BITS was Physics 1, and my score was like 1 out of 50. And I got that 1 because I calculated a simple fraction, the numerator and denominator for which were both already present in the question.
Hello and welcome everyone. Good evening to all the attendees and good morning to all the speakers. Thank you for joining us for the BITS2MS PhD talks today. I'm Rohan and I'll be co-hosting the talk today along with Ashita. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the question box on your control panel. The speakers will try to address those when they are not presenting, and we also have time for questions at the end. Let's start off with our first speaker, Abhijith Asok. Abhijith is a 2010 graduate from BITS Goa, and he pursued Masters in Data Science from Harvard University. He is currently working as a data scientist at Microsoft. So without further ado, I'll turn the time over to Abhijith.
I still remember my second exam ever at BITS was Physics 1, and my score was like 1 out of 50. And I got that 1 because I calculated a simple fraction, the numerator and denominator for which were both already present in the question. So I guess it was like a sympathy 1. So that was where I started my whole career in BITS, and I was not really like passionate about neither Max nor Triple E. It was more like what's the best of the lot that I could go with, and that was basically my reason to choose math out of all the sciences. And Triple E was, well, it basically just came through with the CGPA after my first year. So that's just how the whole journey started, and I was kind of lost all throughout bits when it comes to the academic space. I had like maybe like a couple of good semesters where I was like more organized, and the other ones were, filled with a lot of C's and C minuses in my grade sheet. Overall, I probably had like what, maybe like 5 or 6 A's overall through the entire period of bits, and most of them were for some humanities course or the other. So in in that particular time frame, in the time frame of like the 4 years I spent at BITS, I was trying to like figure out what I want to do in life because I wasn't being passionate about maths or triple E. And then I was like, well, nothing technical seems to appeal to me. So, much like a lot of other people, maybe MBA is like the next natural choice. So I was thinking maybe I'll prepare for like CAT or something. It was nothing that I absolutely wanted to do, nothing that I was passionate about, but it was just like a way forward until I figure out what I wanted to do. And then the PS2 happened, and I was like giving my preferences for PS2. I filled in all like non-technical options that I could find in my like top 50. But the PS division ended up putting me in like a like a hardcore electrical and electronics company, a triple E company in Bangalore, which was like my, I don't know, 55th or 60th option or something. So I was kind of lost. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing here. And then the people there at the company wanted to talk to me before I actually went there and joined them to understand what my skills are in triple E. So that happened, and through the interview, they understood that I did not know anything that they wanted me to know. And so they basically went ahead to the PS division and said, okay, we don't want this person. You just like give him something else, and we want someone else. And the PS division was not like responding to me either. And I was like kind of lost as to what's going to happen. At one point, I was like, maybe I won't even have a PS2. And I was quite unsure what's really going to happen. It was like a quite a stressful time. And then until the final list of like PS allocations came in, I didn't really know what I was going to be doing. And in the final list, out of nowhere, no one bothered to like let me know anything. But in the final list, I saw that I was assigned to Musicma in Bangalore. I don't know why. Maybe Musicma was the only company that was like ready to take in one more person, I guess. So maybe that's the only reason why. I don't think there was any other logic behind that. And at that point, I didn't know what data analytics was. For me, data just meant some numbers in an Excel sheet, and that's all I knew about it. So I ended up at Mu Sigma, and even my start was also delayed because the PS division failed to let Mu Sigma know that, hey, there's going to be one more person. So then I started like a few days or like a week later than all the other people. But Mu Sigma was a place where I understood that, okay, there is something called data science, and it's pretty cool. It's kind of the term itself is kind of new, but it's a unique combination of a lot of different streams together, and it seems to come to me well. I like it. I like the potential of it. I like how passionate I was like becoming towards data science. And that's when I decided that, okay, this is probably like a good career choice that I accidentally fell into. But the thing is that since I did not even know about its existence in bits, I couldn't use my time in college to build myself a profile in data science. So it was going to be like a challenge getting into like a data science role because it's still not a role where like entry level data science roles are not really that common yet. It's becoming common, but it's not there yet. And it was like less so back then in like 2015. So I knew I had like sort of put in a lot of effort to build in a profile that would make people trust me as a data scientist. So my first job was as like, first job out of PS was like as a business analyst at ZS Associates, which was kind of like unfortunate too because I wanted to interview for the data science role at ZS. They were recruiting freshers for that actually. But I was like stuck in Bangalore at my PS and I couldn't make it in time for the data science interview that was happening in campus. So I lost that chance, but then I ended up interviewing as a business analyst and I went to ZS. And there also the matching was pretty much like the worst that could have possibly been because the team that I was put into was like the remotest possible team away from anything to do with data science. So in order to build my profile, I went ahead and I asked for more data science kind of work in addition to the work that I was already doing. So over the next couple of years, I took on like a lot of different roles within CS and outside CS um, that had like something or the other to do with data. So at any point in time in the next 2 years, I was sort of like juggling between multiple different kinds of roles together. And apparently, at the end of 2015, which is like maybe 6 months into my job, I was like, okay, I like data science. I think this is what I want my career to be. Uh, but I never had like an organized education in data science because I didn't know what is existence before. So I definitely need some kind of like a streamlined education. And that's when I decided, okay, fine, I'm gonna do an MS in data science. I'm gonna at least apply for an MS in data science. And then that led to me starting my GRE prep in 2016 February, and then I gave my GRE in like July 2016 something. And then fall 2016, I started applying. And while applying, I started like shortlisting universities and I started pushing in my applications one by one. And that's when I was like, oh, where are the Ivy Leagues? The Ivy Leagues don't seem to have a presence in like analytics slash data science. So I wonder why that's the case. And I started looking things up. And that's when I realized that Harvard is starting its own data science initiative with like three different kinds of data science programs in it. And one of the programs was starting that particular year. And the other ones were starting like a year later. So I thought like maybe I'd give it a shot. I didn't really think that I would get in. It was more like, okay, now that I know about this program, if I don't even apply, I'll look back later and think about what could have happened, and that would be like very regretful. And that's probably pretty much the only reason why I applied. And a lot of other complications happened in between too, but then eventually the admit came through, and I came to Boston. I spent 2 years in Boston and right out of Harvard, in my last semester at Harvard, I interviewed at Microsoft, which is again a lot of right place at the right time situation, and that got me where to I am today. So in essence, it's basically uh, pretty much zero planning. It was all of like very in the moment stuff and taking things as they come. I guess what mattered the most is that I was open to whatever came my way. So rather than saying no to something, I said yes first and then figured out how I can like make it happen. So I think that attitude definitely helped. It's not like a healthy attitude in the long run, But that attitude definitely helped me while I was working to build my data science profile. And beyond that, it's a lots and lots of luck and lot of right place at the right time situation. So all that's like out of your hand. It's not something you can like control at all. So in that sense, I was definitely extremely lucky. So it was like a very big mix that got me to where I am today.
Uh, Thank you, Abhijit, for sharing your story with us all. So we'll move on to our next speaker right now. A PhD provides an individual the freedom to pursue a specific field that one's passionate about and use their research time to make important discoveries within that field. Our next speaker strives to accomplish this all. He graduated from the Goa campus in 2019 and went on to pursue a PhD in physics and astronomy from UCLA. Without any further delay, I turn it over to Pratik Manwani to address all the PhD aspirants in attendance.
Thank you for inviting me to the talk. So I'm a first year student right now, and I'm currently studying in the field of accelerator physics. So when I first came to BITS, I had two interests. One was a childhood interest, which was physics, and one was a new interest, which was robotics. So when I came to BITS Goa with my physics degree, I wanted to first get an electronics degree so that I could pursue robotics as a career. So luckily, even with my low CGPA, I got triple E, and I also managed to get into the robotics club, which led me to participating in competitions like Robocon and other projects. So it was a great experience, but after that, my interest in robotics dwindled down, and then I began to explore other things like machine learning, and I took up online courses on that. I also did two projects in neural networks, and the other thing that happened then was I decided to take up internships in physics just to explore the field and see what it takes to research. So, okay, I applied to internships and I got my first internship in Delhi. It was, I think, after my third year. So it was a like, I mean, I wasn't interested in physics right then, so it was my first internship in physics, and so it was good, and it was my first introduction to accelerator physics. I still decided that this was not enough, and I applied for more internships. I had a course on relativity, so I applied in astrophysics for my winter of my third year, and I got into the Radio Astronomy Center at PIFR. But both these internships were only a month long, so I mean, I couldn't do much, and I decided that if I want to make a decision, I need to take a thesis. And I wasn't really interested in the PS2 then because I wasn't ready for a job. Because I mean, I just had like PS2 as my work experience, and I wasn't really clear on my future path. So, okay, I stuck to my decision, and I applied to organizations like CERN, Austria, and Japan, because I couldn't directly mail professors because I didn't have any field that I wanted to go in. And that's all right because when you're in college, I mean, it's fine to not know things. And so I just decided to apply and see what happens after that. So this is where a turning point in my life came, and I got an email from a professor at CERN, which was my dream organization, and he said that he likes my profile and wants to know about my qualifications. So I was really excited because I mean, getting a chance to work in a dream organization is like it's like nuts, and so I immediately sent him all my qualifications, and he replied and said that I'll get back to you. But it was also disappointing because after that he sent me a mail that I was selected as a reserve candidate and not as a primary candidate, which means that I would only go to CERN if the primary candidate said no. But even then, CERN gave me two things. It like it was a really big confidence booster because I mean, getting selected at your dream organization when you know that you haven't achieved that much is is a lot of confidence. And the second thing that it gave me was a path. It introduced me to a new field, which was to make particle accelerators small. So that was really revolutionary at that time, and when because particle accelerators by itself have they cost a lot of dollars, like millions of dollars, and to make those accelerators compact uh, can make an individual have a really big impact on science in general. So that is what I did, and I used that reserve candidate thing in my emails to the other professors in the field, hoping that they would understand my situation and let me in. I also explored a lot in this field. It was the exact field was plasma wave fields, and I did a lot of research in it. And I decided to mail each and every professor in that field. So okay, at this point, I still had nothing for my thesis, and in the end, the deadline went, and I selected an on-campus thesis. So it was really disappointing because I was getting responses, but I was never really getting any confirmations, which is very necessary when you want to do a thesis. However, after the deadline passed, I got two acceptances, and one was in Japan, and one was at one was at UCLA. So I chose UCLA immediately because the professor at UCLA was the founder of this field. And I mean, think about it. At that moment, getting a chance to work with a professor who was the founder of that field is really mind blowing. I mean, you do not expect that as a person who's coming from another country. So this started my journey at UCLA. I decided to give my GRE in the summer before my thesis, and I also applied to give the GRE physics and TOEFL right after, in the USA. Like I applied for it because GRE physics happens only 3 times, and it's better if you start giving it as soon as you can. Okay, so at UCLA, I was introduced to a, like a different kind of research. I mean, it was very independent. It gave me a lot of responsibility, and it gave me a chance to make an individual impact on my field. It also gave me a wonderful insight into the life of other PhD students because, like, I only interacted with them. I mean, there were some undergraduates, but most of the people in my lab were PhD students. So I kind of got a chance to understand their culture, and I really liked it. So, and since I found my research about fascinating and I had this wonderful insight, I decided to take the plunge of 5 years, and I decided to take a PhD. Before that, I also talked to my professor, and he motivated me, but also cautioned me, saying that it's tough for an international student to get it. So, okay, I was kind of disappointed because, I mean, telling your professor telling you that is kind of disappointing, but I still went ahead and I applied to 3 colleges. I applied to Stanford, UCLA, and Colorado. And the thing that these colleges had in common was that they had the field which I was interested in. I did not apply to any other colleges because I was unsure of anything else. So I just wanted to apply in this particular field. Um, After that, I received my acceptance and I was overjoyed. I mean, a person having a CGPA of 7.3 at that time, I mean, I never expected to get a PhD, and that was like, I mean, I was really excited by that. So at UCLA, currently, I'm a first year student, and the only thing that I have done right now is taken the core classes. we also have to take a comprehensive exam after our first year, and this is like an entrance exam to your PhD. So if you pass, you can progress, and I'll be taking that in my summer. It's been an exciting journey till now, and let's see. I mean, there are like 4 more years to go. So let's like I'll be waiting for what happens, and yeah, that is all. So one thing that I realized from my journey is that although it was very haphazard, it wasn't like I wasn't really sure of what to do. I just took things and like I got my own rejection. I used that thing, I applied it, and that's how I got in. Like as Abhijit said, it's more of things falling into place, and that is out of your hand. But the only thing you can do is you can just not be demotivated, and you can just uh, like work, and you can just work and try to do what you want. Okay. Yeah, about the finances in UCLA. So mostly PhDs are funded throughout their 5 years, and you get a TA, and you also have an option to do an RA if the professor agrees. So if you don't have any particular professor you want to work with, you can still get a TA. Okay, that's all. That was a question in the chat. So thank
Great,
you.
Pratik. Thanks for the insights. Just a small request to all the attendees that if y'all are asking questions, please type them in the question answer box so that everyone can benefit from the answer. So having said that, we'll move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Varun Nayak. Varun is a 2018 BITS Goa graduate. He has a master's in mechanical engineering with a specialization in robotics from Stanford University. It's a pleasure to have you here, Varun. Over to you.
Okay, so thanks a lot. Hey, everybody. And thanks to the team. I don't think I've woken up this early in a long time. So, anyway, I graduated from BITS Goa in 2018 with a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, and I'm currently finishing up my master's in robotics at Stanford. And I mean, just a few years ago, I was exactly like you guys. I was thinking what it would be like to go for an MS, for an MBA. And I think the initial 2 years at BITS for me were kind of pretty ordinary, right? I came in pretty passionate about mechanical engineering as well as electronics. I was deciding between the two when I joined BITS. So I was kind of like just putting my full focus into academics, and I trusted BITS to make me like a capable engineer, let's say. But I think eventually I kind of realized that just an undergraduate degree would be inadequate for me. So come third year, and I started exploring things a little more. I started because I had to answer the question like, what next? I think in third year, that question usually comes to mind. And I considered every single thing. I considered, oh, so should I first go work in industry and then go for higher studies, or should I go for higher studies directly? If it's higher studies, then what should I go for? Should I go for an MS or an MBA? So I was actually really, really conflicted at that point, and I didn't know what to do. So I kind of adopted this explore and reject philosophy, right? So I think if you are really confused about what you are passionate about, I was never sure about what I'm passionate about. I just knew that I wanted to do something technical, right? And uh, of course, my time in clubs, I was really involved in both the robotics clubs and the aerodynamics club in BITS Goa. So I think exploring that and talking to seniors kind of was able to help me reject ideas. Like, for example, I think going to PS1, right? Those are going to PS1 and having experienced industry in India, and that was supposed to be one of the good PS stations, but I really was very disappointed with the work culture and how things really work uh, in industry in India. And at the same time, speaking to people who had gone into business and management, I think talking to a lot of people helped me reject ideas. And then when I finally decided that I want to go for higher studies, I had to decide what field I was really interested in. So then again, I used the same philosophy and started rejecting things within mechanical engineering that I wasn't really interested in. And mechanical, being a broad branch, actually gives you a lot of opportunity to explore different fields. So one by one, I started rejecting, oh, I don't want to go into thermodynamics, I don't want to solid mechanics. And then slowly and steadily, I kind of narrowed down to this intersection between mechanical engineering and electronics engineering. Right? So I also started taking courses from the EEE department, right, as much as I could during my undergrad. So I took relevant courses like control systems, signals and systems in second year itself, so that I could, in second and third year itself, so that I could get more experience from these, from an interdisciplinary point of view, right? So by the middle of third year, I had kind of made up my mind that, okay, yeah, I'm going to go for a master's, right? And I really wasn't interested in going for work experience before my master's, because I really wanted to continue that academic life that I had been having at BITS. I was afraid that if I go into industry, I might not be able to get back to that academic thinking. And I think in many cases, having work experience in your master's applications also does not count for a lot, but that's my opinion, right? Then once I had my target set, I started aggressively applying for a thesis, because I knew how valuable a thesis would be in a master's application, right? So it was funny because I got my thesis, I think just 2 or 3 days before the deadline, right? So I was kind of really exploring a lot of subtopics, right? And I made a research proposal of my own. And it turns out that a professor in the US, and he's not really well known, but for that particular field, which is aerial manipulation, by the way, he had done a lot of work in Europe as well as the US. So I ended up writing an email to him, and I think within 24 hours, he offered me the thesis. So that was really a lifesaver for me, and it turned out to be an amazing experience. And at the same time, also, I decided to graduate early. Right? And this decision was kind of hard to make, as you would imagine, right? I had decided not to sit for placements, right? Because I think that's the biggest thing you have to consider. Do you want to actually consider going for a job? Do you want to keep that as a backup or not? And in my case, I was absolutely convinced that I just want to go for a master's immediately after graduation, right? I don't want to keep a backup of working at a company. So I decided to graduate early, and it did turn out to actually work out pretty well for me. So by the end of third year, I also had a research internship scheduled for the summer at IIT Madras, right? So that was the time when I prepared for my GRE as well. For a few weeks, I prepared for the GRE and the TOEFL. I think you should not spend too much time on those things, in my opinion. And I also ended up working a lot at IIT, and that gave me my first publication. I mean, looking back, it wasn't that great, but I was able to go to an international conference and present that work. And I think that added a lot to my profile. And after that, I went to the United States. I came here for my thesis, and my thesis was probably the single most important aspect of my profile, because right from being here amongst really passionate researchers, right, and especially my advisor, who wasn't really famous or well known, he was actually very young as well. He was in the lab till 8 or 9 p.m. and I used to talk to him, and he was one of the best mentors I've ever had, and I still am in touch with him. Right? I think having such a mentor really makes a lot of difference, not just in your growth in the field, but also guiding you in your future plans, right? And then I think this was a very intense period, because I was working on my thesis. I was also taking courses at that university. My professor allowed me to do that while I was working, and also applying for masters. This was a pretty intense period, right? And I think that once you have really decided on what universities you need to apply to, I think at that point it becomes easy to just go with the flow with all these applications, right? Anyway, more I'll talk about that. I think we'll address those things later about the applications. But after that, I came back to India, I think after 4-1, and I had nothing to do at that point. I literally had nothing to do because I had graduated early, right? And the reason for that is that I knew I had exhausted everything that I could do at BITS, like from the courses to, I think half of my friends also wouldn't have been there if I was on campus. So that also was a factor. And there was really nothing much I could explore in addition to what I had already done in my first 3 years. So I applied for another research internship at IIT Bombay, right? And again, I had a setback there, and he actually accepted my application to work for the next 4 or 5 months. But then after I landed and after I went over and gave him a presentation about what I'm interested in doing, he somehow just randomly rejected me. So that was pretty weird, and that was a big setback for me because I had nothing else planned, right? So I then hustled and I wrote to one of the researchers in BARC in Mumbai, which is also very close to my house, and he accepted me, and I was really able to work in a more chill fashion than a thesis, but I was able to really do some good work over there during those few months, and that was the time I really gained a lot of skills, right? So right from working on hardware, like mechatronic development in my thesis, where I would actually go to a workshop and assemble a robot to do all the wiring and all of the mechatronic integration, right from developing the high-level software integration, writing algorithms, and even using a little bit of machine learning for computer vision related tasks. I think that really gave me a lot of diverse skill set. And I think if you are interested in robotics, right? And I was kind of like a generalist. I really like to explore different aspects of project, like not just, I came in just interested in the mechanical aspect of it, but then I started getting more into electronics and the algorithms part of it, and then more and more into the details of autonomy and artificial intelligence. So that kind of made me a generalist. I think robotics is a great field for generalists, people who are interested in a lot of things. So I think that's why I fit here really well. And yeah, by the end of my 4-2, I was able to also gather a lot of volunteering experiences, although I did not really use any of that for my applications, but I think I enjoyed a lot applying what I knew to both academic and projects that have impact, right? And that really satisfied me a lot. And then come 2018, and I joined Stanford. And initially, I was interested a bit in research. I had a small part inside me thinking that I may want to go for a PhD, but I think eventually, as I did more and more projects, like engineering like projects at Stanford, and then eventually a summer internship, which was in industry, right? I kind of decided that, yeah, I want to just get into do a job after I graduate, and then I just started taking more and more courses that develop my core skills in developing software and robotic systems. So, and now I'm actually about to graduate really soon, and I'll be joining a startup here. And I think for me, joining a startup is almost again very fitting because I get to do a lot of roles in that startup, right? From engineering to architecting solutions to just getting into the details of the software. I guess that's perfect for me, and it has worked out. So I guess that was my journey. And looking back, I would say that the explore and reject philosophy that I mentioned, that really helped me narrow down on 2 or 3 things that I wanted to do and set my targets. I think without being convinced about what I wanted to do, I wouldn't have decided to graduate early, because I think at that point only a few students were making that call. I think maybe of 10 or 15 students in my batch decided to graduate early. Not sure, maybe more. But that decision really took me a lot of thought, and I had to really be confident about what I wanted to do. And then I guess I'm a kind of a planning freak, a control freak. I usually do not. I don't like going with the flow. I like planning well in advance, and I get really frustrated if the plans don't go uh, as I thought it would. And usually that happens, but I think I try to plan as much as possible, and I try to make things fall in place as much as possible. And luckily, it worked out for me. So yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Varun. Now we'll move on to the question and answer segment of this talk. So over to you, Rohan.
Yeah, thanks, Ashita. So we'll start off with a few questions and then we'll try to take some questions from the question control panel as well. So the first question I have here, which of the following is of primary importance according to you with regards to getting admitted for an MS or PhD? And if you could expand on each, CGPA, letter of recommendation, statement of purpose, projects, work experience, or GRE scores. Varun, if you could take that.
Yeah, sure. So I would put the LOR and the SOP for a master's application. I would put the LOR and the SOP as equally and most important, right? I think these two are the places where you can actually stand out, right? So when it comes to your CGPA, your GRE and TOEFL scores, I think GRE and TOEFL scores are just merely filters that universities think of. They, unless your score is really bad, I wouldn't really give a second thought to the GRE or TOEFL scores, right? I think above a certain number, maybe 320 for GRE. There's no real number, but I'm just saying you should be comfortable with it. And then the GPA, again, I would say it pays to have a maybe a 9+ or a really outstanding GPA, but if it's above a certain number, maybe 8. But there are people, of course, right in front of me who can prove me wrong. I would say that uh, if you can put in the effort to get your GPA above 8, like above that 8 mark, I think it'll probably make a difference. But then I would come back to the SOP and LOR and think about how I can really make those things stand out. Right? So for the LOR, if you're doing a project or an internship, really work closely with your mentor, whether it's at BITS or any internship. Get to know them. If you have a publication with them, then that's awesome, right? And your SOP will actually depend on all of the things you do, right from projects to your life experiences to how you came about liking the field that you want to do your master's in. And that's where you can demonstrate your potential for growth, and you can demonstrate your passion. And that is actually where the universities are kind of, it's like a job application, right? The universities are looking at you and they want to decide whether you're a good fit. You have already chosen them. You think, okay, you may be a good fit, but are you a good fit at that university?
Yeah.
That is the admissions committee's work, and that's going to come out from the LOR and the SOP. So that's the place you really want to hit all the points.
Okay, great. So
I just want to add to that because in PhD it's something different.
yeah,
So
sure.
so in a PhD you also have the physics GRE, and this is considered important. Like I talked to a bunch of professors here, and they just straight up asked me, "Have you given the GRE?" And like I said, yeah, I gave the general GRE, but they were like, "No, no, no, we're talking about the physics GRE." So as Varun said, those are cutoffs. Like GRE and TOEFL are cutoffs, but physics GRE is important. So try to get a score above 900 in that.
Okay, that's great. So, which is a better time to apply for the postgrad, like fall or the spring semester? Like if Abhijit could take that.
Uh, Multiple considerations here. So one thing, if you look at the job market, it is, this is something that people told me when I applied to, and it is kind of true as well, that Springtime is the time when companies are sort of like wrapping up their entire financial year, and the number of roles that will be hiring for will be less because they're still waiting to hear about what their budget is going to be like.
Yeah.
So that's definitely going to affect the number of roles you have to apply. But also at the same time, there are less number of students who are graduating in the spring. So it's like where that balance is found.
Yeah.
But on the whole, if you take the ratio, I still think the fall definitely offers a lot of offers more options compared to what the spring does.
Okay.
Especially since it's a time when the budgets are all figured out and they know what they want for the next year and everything. So my program's a fall program, but at the same time, it's originally a 3 semester program. So basically, it started in the fall, but I was graduating in like the winter slash spring. So even though I advocate for like a fall graduation, that was a risk that I was willing to take at the time because I was kind of like, okay, maybe the university rep, the name of the university might actually help me gain interviews, which ended up being kind of true, you know. So up until the interview, at least, I think the university name sort of like has an advantage because it sort of catches eyes quickly and then gets you into the oh, this is a considerable pile very quickly. But come the interview, at the interview, it doesn't really matter whether you're from like Harvard or like Sharmaji's college, because it's all about like how you present yourself and how you portray your entire profile as.
Right.
But then it definitely helps you get through that door. Now, I was supposed to graduate in winter, but then because of like a health emergency, I had to sort of extend my program by like a semester. So I made my third semester part-time, and my fourth, I had added in like a fourth semester, which was full-time. And Harvard was like extremely supportive of that. I should say that it's not something you expect university of such caliber to like do for one student, but they
Mhm.
totally went above and beyond to do that for me. Um, and uh, and it's also only because that happened that I'm basically in the role that I am today, because the role that I am today has like a July start date, and the interview for that happened in like January or February of 2019. And I came to know about that. I wasn't even like planning to apply for Microsoft in the first place because I was like, there's no way I'm gonna get in. But once again, at the right place at the right time, an HR sort of
Serendipity.
like, yeah, reached out and told me that, hey, there's this new unique program within Microsoft that we're starting, and this is like you might be like interested in. And I'm like, well, I mean, what's the harm? Someone came to me, so I should at least like turn in my resume, and that's how it all happened. And that happened because my winter graduation, spring graduation ended up being a fall graduation in the first place. So overall, I would say that also another aspect to think of it is that not all programs have spring admits. Like a lot of major programs only have fall intakes probably because of like this reason itself. So in general, unless there's like a very strong reason why you want to do a spring graduation or like a spring program, I would definitely advocate for fall programs.
Okay, great. I think you're accounting serendipity for everything that has happened here.
It's true.
Being
It's
a bit
totally
modest.
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's actually very, very true. I mean, there's a lot more that happened in my life that I'm not talking right now, which actually, attaches itself to serendipity. But anyway.
Yeah. Great. So, like Pratik, you said you applied only for 3 universities. So, if you could add to that on how should students choose when they are choosing multiple, basically, how should you choose multiple universities? What should be the strategy like for that? And if others can add to that.
Okay, so since I applied to only three universities, I mean, for a PhD, it differs. So basically, in my case, since I was doing a PhD, it requires a lot of commitment on my part. And commitment in the sense is that I would be spending 5 to 6 years in one research lab. And so the university name is not that important as much as the name of the research lab. Um, I mean, so what I would suggest if is that if somebody wants to pursue a PhD, they need to look at the research labs, at the professors, and yeah, and what the university can provide to them. In an MS application, I think the university name plays a big role because in that you also need to find a job right after graduation. So, and since you're doing a course for only 1 or 2 years, I think the university name is required in that case. But yeah, specific to a PhD, it's not that important. And choose the best university that you can get into, and choose your advisor properly, which is more important.
Okay. Varun or Abhijit, would you like to add anything to that?
I mean, I applied for to about I think 8 or 9 universities,
Okay.
right? And I think my philosophy was just go for it. I mean, I knew that I wouldn't be satisfied settling for like a safe university, let's say. I think there is a formula, and there's a disclaimer here, right? I'm not suggesting that you follow this,
Yeah.
right? So I was feeling good about my profile, and I really did not want to settle, given that it's an investment of your time and money and whatnot. I didn't want to settle for something which is safe, let's say. So I think the definition of safe ambitious depends on which field you're in. Like I would say in robotics, CMU is probably more ambitious than Stanford or Harvard, I would say. And I got rejected by CMU, uh, evidently. So I think those things differ depending on branch. It just does not match exactly with the university rankings posted online. So my philosophy was just go for it. I think 5 or 6 of the university I had chosen, I was pretty unsure of getting into them, right? But I knew that I really wouldn't compromise on the quality of the university or the quality of the professors and the teaching. So that was my philosophy, and I would encourage that if you are feeling good about your profile, I would encourage you to follow that.
Okay, great. So, my next question is to Abhijit. You mentioned you are not like a straight A student in terms of grades. So, what aspect of your application do you think made it stand out among the pool of stellar profiles that apply to Harvard?
This is again kind of like tied into your first question about like what matters more, whether it's grades or like LOR or SOP or whatever. It totally depends on like each program. And my program specifically, honestly, like I had no idea what they were looking for. It was more like I came across the program only like during my applications, and I already started applying to schools, which is when I came across this particular program. And I kind of like had a good idea about what I wanted to write in my SOP for that, which is like quite different from the other the other programs because my data science program was like had a specific focus on healthcare, like data science applications in healthcare. And my first job was at BITS2Series, which is a pharmaceutical consultancy. And there were like a couple of other initiatives that I was involved with that had some healthcare aspect to it too. So I kind of like wanted to make this its own unique SOP. And also they had like a word limit of like 600 and it is not much to work with. So I had to sort of like reframe the entire SOP. And while for the other universities, I sort of had like a template that I prepared initially, which I then sort of like adjusted according to each one's preferences. For Harvard, when it came to Harvard, I wrote in like an entirely new SOP from scratch. And I spent like 2 to 3 weeks doing that. And I think it was totally worth it because one thing I always tell people when it comes to writing an SOP is that you should look at it like a story. You should look at it like weaving a story. So rather than saying I did this, then I did that, and after all that I did this one huge thing, then people will be like, okay, so what? So it's always helpful when you weave it like a story, which says that, okay, I did this. This is what I learned from it, which led me into this new other experience that I wasn't expecting, and then that led me into this, and this was my learnings from that, and this is also my weaknesses from that. I mean, that's also important to mention. Like if you notice that, okay, notice through an experience that okay, this was like a weakness of mine. And then in the next experience, I sort of like focused on making that up. That's like a very valuable point for them to know that you're learning. Because if you claim that you're perfect, no one's gonna like give you an admit, probably.
Correct.
So I think that's what the SOP and like combination of the SOP and LORs, like Varun said, that's like really important. And I think that particular combination is what, you know, made me stand out because you only get like 2 minutes per admissions committee member to like have to impress them with your essay, to impress them with your SOP. And maybe like two admissions committee members would look at one single SOP. So it's like 4 minutes for something you spent like weeks and months making that you get to like impress them with. And then there's like a pile of like hundreds of other applications with like similar initiatives. So basically you got to think about what will make you stand apart and what will like catch their eye when they like read your SOP. So overall, I think that's what definitely made all the difference because it was definitely not grades. It was just definitely how I portrayed myself in my essays and how my recommenders portrayed me in their LORs.
Okay, great. So the next question is to Varun. You said you decided to graduate early from BITS. So, like with the gift of hindsight, how do you think that decision panned out? And would you advise students who are pretty much sure that they want to go for a postgraduate education to follow a similar path?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, I think I'm getting a lot of questions about that. So as far as graduating early goes, for me, it worked out to be probably the best decision of my life, right? Because I think as far as doing what I could have done at BITS in fourth year goes, I think there was absolutely nothing I could do if I was on campus in fourth year, apart from maybe continue working in the club that I was working in. Right? I think in terms of courses, I'd exhausted everything I could have done. And it's not that, I mean, it's not that BITS is super flexible that I could have taken courses from, let's say, more courses from computer science or electronics in those few months. And I also did not want to sit for placements. I think that was the biggest factor. I did not want to even think about going for a job or having that as a backup. That was not my consideration at all. Um, so it did work out for me because in 4.2, although none of it affected my master's application, I was able to explore a little more of robotics on the software side, develop simulations for BARC. That's where I worked in 4.2. And I spent a few months volunteering at a makerspace in Mumbai. And that actually opened a lot of doors for me. I was able to network a lot, get to know more people. In fact, some people I met there volunteering and working, some of them are here. Actually, one of them is here at Stanford with me. And through those experiences, I was able to uh, use my skills for, as I mentioned, projects that had impact. That although it would have been great to show all of that in my master's application, I think I didn't care about it at that point because I know I was making the best use of my time. I was also at home, right? I was in Mumbai, I was at home. So that was great for me spending a few months at home, eating home food. It worked out perfectly. Um, but I think if you are not going immediately, let's say for a master's, then it's going to have an effect on your application, right? And I think there are some universities in Europe, especially, who may raise some flags regarding your early graduation, basically your 7 semester bachelor's, right? So I would keep an eye out for that, but I don't think it's a big issue. There might be a few universities who might raise flags, but I think if you complete the number of units that they expect, which should be the case, even if you graduate early, you should be. And and if all that is good, then it's just better. Right? If you have nothing to do in bits, if you don't want to sit for placements, graduate early, right? And you have to plan this in advance because I think at one point in third year in 2.2 and 3.1, I think I took like 6 or 7 courses at one point. Right? I was overloading a lot, and it was manageable. I'm not sure about the policies now, but if you can do that, I would encourage you to do that because it's a really good use of your time. Working at some organization or doing some research or any independent project also, it's a lot of things. I would encourage that.
Great. Next question to Pratik. You have a dual degree in physics and triple E from BITS. So, what fueled the decision to pursue pure sciences over engineering? And in your opinion, how rewarding is the career in research and academia compared to, say, a corporate job?
Okay, so there were many factors that affected this, and so during my time in BITS, I became less interested in the field that I wanted to pursue, which was electronics. And I got interested in the studies in my physics classes, and I did not go to like the triple E classes. And I mean, this is also there is also a factor of the teaching that occurred in BITS. I mean, I preferred the physics classes over the electronics classes. Also, at the start, I was more focused on machine learning and robotics by joining those clubs. But later, I realized that this is not the path that I want to take. I want to use these things in something else, like in science or in something else. So that's why I decided to explore. Now, exploring is really important because it gives you a chance to decide on your field. It makes you realize what you want to do in your life, what you want to reject. So that kind of opened up uh, a lot, and also other factors that fell into place, like getting a thesis, uh, getting a mail from someone. I mean, all those things kind of factored in, and so I decided to pursue my science degree and not my engineering degree.
Okay.
Also, regarding the next question, so after graduation with a PhD, one has the option of working in the industry, or working as a postdoc. So working in academia is more rewarding, but it's also very challenging as not a lot of people get in, and the ratio is quite bad because there are not a lot of job openings in academia as compared to industry. So I'm still a first year student, so I do not know a lot about the decision that I will take after my 5 years. But yeah, for now, both these options seem good.
Great. So we've had a lot of questions about funding. So Varun, if you could address the different ways you could secure funding and how to increase chances for the same. And maybe even Abhijit can add. I know you've had the privilege of being funded before getting admitted.
Right. So I did not have any. Of course, Abhijit can talk about funding, but I did not have any funding when I came to Stanford.
Mm.
I mean, there are some fellowships and scholarships that you can apply to, but I mean, those are a long shot, at least at Stanford, right? You have to be. I mean, they prefer PhD students. They would prefer students who are on a research track, and most master students here at Stanford are not on that track. And of course, there are scholarships and fellowships you can apply to, but they are very limited in terms of distribution. Yes, and more so for international students, that becomes even harder, right? So the way I funded my graduate degree was just in the initial few months, like the initial, let's say, 2 quarters. We have a quarter system, not a semester system. The initial 2 quarters, I self-funded myself, right? But then after that, I really hustled to get a research assistantship in my third quarter, and then after that, the next two, after the summer internship, of course, where I was able to get some cash, I also did a couple of teaching appointments, right? And at Stanford, they really, really make up for your work. So your tuition is completely funded, right? So you don't have to pay any tuition, right? And on top of that, they pay you an amount equivalent to the tuition. So
Okay.
like 1 quarter's tuition. So basically, you don't pay tuition for 1 quarter, and you can pay off your other quarter's tuition which you pay.
Mm.
So I think adding all of that, I'm not sure other universities also may have a similar structure of pay, but adding all of that, I was able to maybe, I would say, cancel out all of the tuition that I paid to Stanford, right? Maybe nullify all of it, and then the only thing I had to worry about was the rent, which I sort of managed with my summer internship salary. But yeah, initially, I had to take money from my family. I'm guilty of that. Cheap.
Yeah, Abhijit, if you could add to that.
in my case, well, once again, I'm going to point towards serendipity for sure. Uh, but basically, what happened is the the application, the fellowship slash scholarship application to Harvard came in like 2 weeks after the main application was submitted, and it was basically just hey, here's a list of all these fellowships that we have, like humongous list, Harvard being the university was like the highest endowment in the world, like huge, huge list. It took me like a day or two to like go through each one and see what they were. And basically the thing was, okay, just look through all this, look at the requirements and tell us what all you are actually eligible for so that we'll consider you for that. And the decision is basically based on your actual application itself. You don't have to like write a separate essay or anything for it. And then what happened was there was this doctor couple who lived in San Antonio, Texas, who were alumni of the particular school at Harvard where my program was, and they decided to like give back to the school in that particular year, and they started this whole new fellowship after the wife's mother's after in the wife's mother's name for people who are coming in from low-income countries into that particular school to study. And India is definitely like a low income country when it
Right.
compares to like the US income. So because of that, I was considered for it, and it was like the first year that fellowship was being instituted, and I was like the first recipient of it. Like I didn't even know what was happening, and I just like filled in a form, and I was like, here you go, here's $30,000, and but that totally definitely helped. That was like almost half of my entire tuition, so it got covered. And I didn't really focus on like TAs or RAs in the first year at least. And TAs was a problem as such because my school, the school of Harvard that I went to was like a graduate only school. So technically you can't, at least at Harvard, you can't become a TA unless you've already taken that course. And there is no course to take because you're like the junior most person
Yeah.
in the school,
Yeah.
right? So TA wasn't really an option in the first year. And then second year, I started looking for an RA, and there is like a portal at Harvard. I'm sure there's like at Stanford and UCLA as well. There's a portal where people keep on listing like RA and TA jobs, and even like other random jobs like library assistant or stand cashier in the cafe or whatever. So in the second year, I started looking for something a little bit more, which is when I found out like an RA position which was by the HOD or like the ex-HOD of the Department of Biostatistics. She was like one of the foremost in the world in like statistical genetics and genomics. So that felt interesting, something I've never tried before. So I was like, okay, let's do it. And one thing that really helped was, uh, I don't think I mentioned this before, but my cohort is like really, really small. It had like anywhere from 15 to 20 people per year, and the admit rate is like 9% to 10% or something, and they intentionally keep it that way even though they have the resources to increase the size. They won't do it because they want to like frame the program as like individual attention to everyone, and that really worked as well because my professors, at least the directors of my specific program, they knew all of us by name and like a background and everything, and they were like some of them were like really really nice. So one fine day I was having like a very bad mental health day, and my professor was like, hey, you know what, you don't look so good today. Let me keep aside all my stuff for the rest of the day, and I'm going to like take you out for dinner and talk to you and make sure you're okay and everything. And it's really not something that you'd expect a Harvard professor to do for like one single student,
Yeah.
right? And so because of that, you get to build a lot of rapport with your fellow professors because of this personalized approach. And when I applied for an RA, she knew the professor I was like really close to. So they kind of like talked to each other, and she put in a good word for me and everything. And that sort of like put me into like a project, an RA project, which was like in statistical genetics, but also it was like data science related, but it was in the field of statistical genetics. And it was like a very groundbreaking product in the entire field. And right now they're coming up with like this huge publication for it. It might even end up being in Nature at some point. So
Right.
it really helped me be part of that. So the point is that funding, as Varun said, funding for MS is generally very difficult. As Pratik said, like PhD, you totally don't want to go for a PhD without funding. But for MS, it's really difficult to get funding in the first place. So it totally depends. The way people approach it totally depends on each university. So some of the other programs when they gave me the admission, they gave me like a TA or some kind of like a tuition waiver or something along with the admission. And they do that differently compared to what Harvard did. So it totally depends on the university. In a nutshell, there are definitely like possibilities and avenues. Even there are like external scholarships which can apply to outside of university. But in general, at a master's level, funding is definitely difficult to acquire.
Okay. So I'll direct the next question to Pratik. What are the pros and cons of going for a PhD directly after BITS as opposed to a master's and maybe then a PhD? And is an MSc degree enough for an application towards a PhD?
Question. In the field of physics, you don't have a separate master's degree anywhere. Most of the programs offer a direct PhD, and with the option of like if you drop out, you will get a master's degree. It's something like that. So suppose I drop out after my second year, I will go away with a master's degree. So it's helpful because okay, you don't have to uh, I mean, you don't have to be in the program for 6 years and you can get away with your master's degree. So, yeah, the con of doing a PhD directly, I think the only con that I can think of is that one has to be ready when he takes a PhD.
Mm,
So, if you're not ready, you can apply for a master's in some other field. There are courses in computational science which have a master's, and once you take that, you can decide then that do you want to get a PhD or do you want to do a job.
mm,
So con is only if you are not sure. Okay.
right.
Regarding the other question, is an MSc degree better? Sorry, is an MSc degree enough to apply for a
Yeah.
PhD? Yeah, it is. So we always say that BITS has an undergraduate master's degree, but it's not that. I mean, I just said that I have a master's in science and they accepted me. So,
Right.
and all the other PhD students that I know of have only done a bachelor's in science.
Okay.
So, so I mean, you can do a PhD straight after you have a bachelor's, and it doesn't matter. And
Okay.
having a master's from a BITS is just an added advantage. It's not something
Right.
that is bad.
Correct. Okay, that's good to know.
One thing I forgot to add regarding that funding question is that
Yeah, Vijay.
something that a lot of people don't know about is there are options to like get like an educational loan from the US itself.
Mm,
So none of my funding came from India. So my fellowship covered half my tuition, and like my RA in my second year helped with my living expenses a little bit, but everything else actually came from a loan within Harvard itself. So a lot of universities in the US have like their own credit unions. They're like cooperative banks in
right.
back in India, right? So like smaller versions of banks that's like non-profit. They work for the benefit of people in the university, like students or employees or whatever.
Mm,
And while if you try to get an educational loan back in India, they make you run around for like months for this paper and that paper and like papers you haven't even heard of in your life. But when it came to like the Harvard Credit Union, it was more like, oh, how much exactly do you need, and what exactly is your program that you're coming to? And I'm like, I filled up like a form, a two-page form or something with my address and all those details, and like 3 days later, they were like, okay, fine, here's $70,000 approved for you. And
right.
it's also like the interest rate is also kind of like half of what you get in India. So in India, it's like what 11%, 12% or something is like general interest rate for educational loan, I guess. But my Harvard loans come with like what 5%, 6% interest rate or something. Not all universities have this. Again, I think NYU does have something like this, and a bunch of other universities do, but not everyone does. And also, I think Harvard has actually cut down that upper limit since I graduated, so you might be able to borrow less compared to what you will be able to borrow then. But this is definitely an option people should look into, whichever university they are planning to go to.
That's good to know. So my next question is to you, Abhijit. So you are currently working at Microsoft as a data scientist, and like you have quite a few work experiences with you, like when you were at BITS as well. So if you could elaborate as to how Harvard has helped you in adding value to your work and how different it is from like just being at BITS.
Actually, a very good question. So, uh, as I said before, I applied to Harvard or applied for like MS in general because I felt like I needed a more streamlined approach to my data science education because I was trying to learn whatever in like the jobs and the work experience that I was having, but it was like all very scattered and I never ever really had like a mentor that's told me that, hey, if this is the problem, you should probably approach it like this. It was more like me trying to like figure out how to do things on my own. So that's why I thought maybe like a streamlined education definitely helps, and that totally did as well. So the education at Harvard was very streamlined. It was very the program I did was like very more statistical in nature than computer sciencey. So there are like multiple ways to approach data science, and computer science is one, core math is one, and core stats is one. Mine was like more statistical than anything else, but it's still like a very valuable direction to have in data science for sure. So it was very streamlined and a lot of things, especially like there was a course in like applied machine learning at Harvard that I took, and that course was instrumental in helping me attend my interviews at Microsoft because the nature of interview was like there was like a initial phone call which lasted for a half an hour more, mostly like resume stuff. But they because it was an AI specific role, they also like the first question was regarding my past publication. Like straight up went into, so tell me about this paper. What was that about? And I didn't really expect that. And I wrote that paper like 2 years ago, so I totally forgot what it was about. So then I had to like make something up along the way. But it ended up being fine. You know, I remembered along the way, and I ended up being fine. And then it was like a on-site day, which is like four straight interviews of like 45 minutes, like no breaks in between. And broadly, they covered the math behind machine learning, data wrangling, the code behind data wrangling, and also like your problem-solving approach. And some courses that I learned in like the data science one course that I took at Harvard was very useful in helping me with data wrangling. Applied machine learning taught me a lot about like machine learning math, and the capstone course which we had in the end was very useful towards the problem solving approach and everything. So in that, I would say it translated directly into the whatever I learned at Harvard definitely did translate directly into Microsoft, and that was what I was expecting to have when I joined the program too. And one other thing to note is that work experience, the importance of work experience definitely varies a lot when it comes to both applying for MS and like a job after that. However, one interesting thing to note is that my present role at Microsoft is a second level data scientist. It's a data scientist two, and it's
Okay.
actually a PhD level position, and I don't have a PhD.
Yeah.
So when I applied, I was applying for the data scientist one position, but after looking at my profile, the director of the program thought that my work experience with relevant work experience with data was sort of like enough to sort of balance the PhD requirement, at least in the certain things that we're looking for. It's a very unique situation. It doesn't happen ever at all. Serendipity again. There you go.
Exactly.
So, so it doesn't happen at all ever. And we have like maybe 10 people in the DS2 position in my entire large team. And out of them, 9 of them have PhDs, and I'm the only one without it. So, I would say there are a lot of factors that come into play into deciding where you end up and how your mold is being defined. Uh, but but yeah, Harvard was definitely without Harvard, I don't think I would have made it to Microsoft, simply put.
Nice. So I'll move on to Varun, and like we've been getting these questions a lot in the question answer panel as well. So the coronavirus basically has affected every sector with education, travel, everything. So how do you think it is going to affect the admissions for this year? And should students decide to sit this 1 year out and maybe wait till the next year to apply?
Yeah, this is a hard question to answer. Um, so the last few months at Stanford have been completely online, right? And I would say it wasn't really worth, especially if you're paying full tuition and if you are, I mean, the thing you would expect from Stanford, right? The meat of the thing that you get, the value that you get from a master's degree, I think, is interacting with people, right? Learning from them, working on projects with them. I think that becomes really hard when you're doing everything remotely, like interacting with professors, interacting with other students. I think that is the meat of the value that you get, right? As Also networking with potential employers and so on and so forth. The opportunities that you get, I think the avenues kind of get blocked because of doing everything remotely. That's my opinion, and in my experience, what I've seen in the last few months. Of course, the economy is not doing well either, but I think it'll catch up in a year or so. I don't think that for people who are going to get into masters, I don't think they should be worried about what's going to happen when they graduate. I think they'll be okay by then. It's the worst at the moment, right? Um, I personally, if I was in a situation where I have an admit now, right, and I'm making a decision on what to do, I would defer it to next year, right? Because as far as most universities are concerned, I think they are planning to have the rest of this year completely online for sure,
Online. Yeah.
right? So that will definitely not be a satisfying experience, and I think most students probably won't even be able to get into the country. I think visa at this point maybe not easy. So doing I mean you'll end up watching recorded videos because of the time difference, right? Maybe attending office hours will also be very difficult for you. I think office hours is a big component as well as when you're taking courses, right? Because you get to interact with people who are doing research in that field. I would defer it to next year, right? uh, it's a hard decision because then what do you do for 1 year, right? I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, that is something that you really need to think about. I mean, you can do online courses sitting at home for 100 times less the cost, right? So you
Yeah.
could foresee, you could do an independent project, or you can do several things just by being at home. It's not, I don't think personally it's going to be worth it, right? And from a job point of view, I think by next year, if you do decide to join and you do ultimately end up, let's say in Jan or February, maybe you come here to maybe Europe or United States, wherever you are. And I think the situation for getting a summer internship, which is crucial for you to get into industry later, would probably be okay. I think that's something you need to consider. People who are already in their master's programs right now, who are 1 year into it, I think they are having a hard time getting a summer intern. And they're facing problems, and they're being forced to take courses instead of doing work, which is again pretty disappointing from the point of view of gaining more experiences as they progress to a full-time job. So anyway, I mean, there are a lot of perspectives to this. I really don't know how to answer it in a straight way, right? It really depends on how much you feel it's going to be worth sitting at home and watching somebody remotely, and if that's worth it, then go for it. Otherwise, I would defer.
Yeah, difficult times indeed. Pratik, if you would like to add anything with respect to the PhD side of the pandemic.
Okay, so for a PhD, since it's for 5 to 6 years, it's fine if you join right now because out of these 5 6 years, only 3 months or 6 months would be online. So it wouldn't really matter that much. You can always teach online and get the TA funding. So for a PhD, I think it's fine if you join and not defer your admissions. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. So I'll direct the next question to you, Pratik. What are your opinions on, say, doing a thesis or like going for a PS2, and that really have uh, an effect on your application to the postgrad?
Okay, so for me, I definitely recommend doing a thesis, and I'm really sure that this is what led me to my PhD. Also, if you're really interested in academia and if you're sure about doing that, a PS2 that wouldn't really add anything of value to your application because a PS2 is an experience in industry, and if you actually want to do a PhD, it's not really valuable to you. Although for an MS, I think work experience counts in your application, and if you don't have a good profile before, you can obviously do a PS2, get some work experience in industry, and later on apply for an MS. Uh, but also, if you're not sure about doing a PhD, it's definitely fine doing a PS2 and then after that applying for an RA or like which is a research assistantship. And this can be directly done by emailing the professors and asking them for a 1 year RA. I think the professors would accept you if you have sufficient knowledge and research in that field.
Okay. Abhijit, would you like to add anything with respect to the MS side?
Yes, I can answer. Can you repeat that question once more?
Like, what is the benefit or the disadvantage with taking a thesis over a PS2 or vice versa?
Uh, it would totally depend on what you're aiming at, I think, at least from an MSI. Maybe like Varun has like different thoughts about this, but uh, if the program you're applying to, I can speak from like data science specifically and not about the other degrees as such, but in data science slash analytics slash business analytics, it depends on how research focused your program is supposed to be. Because there's a Carnegie Mellon MS in machine learning, which is like super research oriented, I believe. So if you're applying like a program like that, maybe like a really good thesis would make get you like leaps and bounds for further other than just like a generic PS. Whereas if you're applying to, let's say, UT Austin's MS in business analytics program, which is like definitely one of the best business analytics programs out there. When you're applying to program like that, which is very industry oriented, thesis won't really mean much. Rather, if you were in a job where you interacted with clients and did some really quality business analytics work or like business intelligence work or like played around with data and created some real impact in the field, that's going to get you much forward than anything else. So I think it totally depends on the not even the field, even inside the field there are like a lot of differences. So it totally depends on the particular program you're applying to. So if you're applying to, let's say, 9 universities, maybe for 4 of them a thesis would do better for you, and for the 5 of them a PS would do better for you. So it's like up in the air pretty much.
Yeah. So that's great. And I would like to ask a question to every one of you a little bit off the note. Like, how have the clubs and departments at BITS helped you all in the field that you're currently pursuing? So, if Varun, we could start with you.
I owe a lot of the motivation and a lot of whatever practical technical knowledge that you need as an engineer apart from the courses you take at BITS. I think you need those experiences in how to just wire up some motors, right? As something as simple as that. How to wire up a motor, how to get a stepper working, or how to I don't know, simplest of things, how to just get a servo to do some stupid task. I mean, it's starting from that to complicated things. I think you obviously build towards more complex things. I think as far as clubs and departments go, I would talk specifically with respect to technical clubs. I was a part of only technical clubs on campus and nothing else. I think the main value is, working in a team, like working with people who have different skill sets. Like in the aerodynamics club, which I was the coordinator of for a 1 year, I had the experience of working with really passionate people. I think much more passionate than I ever was, to be honest. And they're doing great things, right? I think being with them, learning from them, and just even sitting with them and talking about, oh, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we build this? Can we build that? I think that really fueled my motivation in towards technical studies and going for further studies. Uh, I think, of course, there is a limit when it comes to how much you can achieve in a club because of the funding issues that you have. But I think that shouldn't stop you from, really aiming high. I think as the departments and clubs are maturing on campus, I think they are. I think towards the end of my third year, I think the robotics club, they changed their agenda to stop going to Robocon, I think, and they started doing more long-term projects in partnership with the professors on campus. I think they were able to achieve a lot more, and the juniors I know from that club are really doing well right now. So I think if you're interested in going for further studies in the technical field, doing a master's, if you're not in a technical club, it's not the end of the world. You can always just sit in your hostel room and do something on your own, right? But I would encourage you to obviously get to know all these people in technical clubs, talk to them, get ideas from them. You might have friends in clubs, right? Of course you have friends in technical clubs. So just get to know them. You can get into a club at any point, second, third year, it doesn't really matter. And it just depends on what you want to work on, what your vision is, and how hardworking you are ready to be. And that's going to pay off for sure. I think most of my resume were projects for most of my resume were projects which I did in clubs. There's nothing else that I had on PS1. I think in when I was applying for a thesis. So it was really valuable for me.
Great. Pratik, if you could take that.
What was the question again? I was typing something.
The departments and clubs at BITS, like how it is.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, as Varun said, it's a gradual process. It adds up. So initially, you start with things like using a motor driver to run some cars. I mean, you don't think that's going to be useful in the long run, but it is useful because it gives you the confidence to do larger projects. And also departments like I was in quad controls, and one thing that I learned from them was how to email. I mean, you don't think that that's going to be useful, but it was. I mean, I got to know how to construct an email and how to give a proper message without any outside help. Like the mails I drafted, I didn't even ask any other senior how to draft them. I just knew that, okay, I know how to do this, and I went along with it.
Right.
And other clubs, like I was in Robocon, and Robocon helped me help me to show how a team effort uh, works and how it can be used to make in essence a robot or any project. I mean, it's a very good collaborative experience which I think everyone should have before they go to any other lab or any or work in industry. So I think it's useful.
Great. Vijit?
So I was not in any technical club. Let me say that first, especially because I didn't know what I was doing when I was in BITS. But I was in Mime Club and I was in Dodgema, and they definitely like helped me survive, so to say. Because like it was a time when I had like no aim and I didn't know what I was doing, and I needed like some purpose. So basically, the preparing the waves mime and the quark mime were like really the highlights of every year that I had that.
Yeah.
I won't say it's perfect. Looking back, there are like a lot of things that I would have changed or I would have done differently, and I would not have let happen or whatever. Looking back, there's like a lot of problems I can see, but at least in that space, in that headspace, that definitely helped me survive. And just mental health is something that people don't take seriously even now, but it's actually a very, very real thing, especially like when you move to like a different country on your own and you like live on your own and you have to build a network from scratch all over again in like a strange country and like very different kinds of people and everything. Um, Having like a strong mental health is and healthy situation for your mental health is like very, very important. And equivalently in bits, I think Mime Club and Dodgema were the things that gave me that. And so there's no like direct application between something I did there working out for me in my application, but the whole path to getting to the application was very positively influenced by Mime Club and Dodgema. So I would say if you're joining any kind of like an interest club, like an arts club or like sports club or something, do it because you're passionate about it, not because it'll add some value to like an application later.
Great. That's good to know. So coming back, I'll ask the next question to Pratik. So should you directly apply for postgrad or like you said, a work experience or something, does that count? Or does that influence your admission?
So work experience in the industry would not count a lot if it's not in the particular field that you're applying in.
Mm.
But that being said, working in a research university, like working as a research assistant, definitely helps your application. So when I was applying for a PhD, I wasn't pretty sure of getting it. Even my professor said that it's going to be hard, like because international students have this non-resident tuition fee, which the department has to pay, and they don't like that. I mean,
Yeah.
So he's cautioned me that it's gonna be tough. He also said this particular thing, which I didn't like at the time. He said that if you're from Indiana, you would get in definitely. But since you're from India, it might be tough. So,
Right.
so yeah, okay, that was a bit disappointing, but I still applied and I got in. However, I was still sure of doing physics, and if I didn't get in at that moment, I would definitely apply for a research assistantship for 1 year and then decide what I want to do. So that was what I was planning to do.
Okay. So next question is to Varun. So how?
Rohan,
Yeah.
should I take over for the audience questions?
Yeah, sure. I'll ask this question, then we can take up a few questions from the audience.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So, how important are research publications in your application for masters? Varun, if you could take that.
Okay. I think Pratik kind of mentioned. Pratik and Abhijit both kind of mentioned it. If your program is research oriented,
Mm.
right? Of course, if it's a PhD, then that's a no-brainer. A publication will matter a lot in your application. Right? But if your master's program is more research oriented, then it definitely would count for a lot, right? And but that doesn't mean you should just submit any work of yours. You should be proud of that, right? And
Yeah.
I had several opportunities to actually submit work, right? Uh, both from my internship in IIT Madras and my thesis. I had an opportunity to submit for both, but I think that my thesis work was kind of incomplete. So I could have just put it on to some conference just with some simulation studies, blah blah blah, and added that to my application. But at least my mentor at the time was like, I think it'll be better if you have a complete project or a complete thesis where you can have experimental results as well and something that you're proud of.
Right.
Uh, so I wouldn't just submit for the sake of it, like to add to your application. You can always mention your work in your SOP. You can always have a link to the work that you've done. Maybe it's a video or it's some kind of presentation on your website or whatever. All of that will count, right? Having a publication for something that is not research oriented will not count for that much. I think it's more uh, what you have worked on and how relevant the work is with respect to that uh, particular program. For research oriented things, yeah, I would definitely, if you're in, let's say, if you're in 3-1 or 3-2, you're thinking of doing a thesis or a research internship right now. Um, yeah, I would definitely explore some fields where you can do some work, something that has not been attempted before, or maybe even something just to improve some method, improve some algorithm, or implement something in experimentally. If you have those options right now, and if you want to do research, I would think that way, right? But if you don't, then it's not. You should not bother yourself too much with it. It's my opinion, but I think Pratik and Abhijit will have different opinions.
Yeah. If you all want to add Pratik or Abhijit to it.
Okay, and add to that, so there's a misconception that you cannot do a PhD without getting a publication, and the misconception is a result of like you see people having publications in when you're in college. So I just want to say that I've seen a lot of PhD students here that do not have any publications, uh, and and it also account and sorry, the fields also account in this. Like, suppose you're doing theory, nobody expects you to make a paper in theory. Like it happens when you're in your third year in a PhD. It doesn't happen before that.
Mm.
But okay, if you're in a field which has a lot of computation and a lot of simulations, you can make a paper out of it. And also, if you're in experimental and you have you have worked in some organization, you can expect a publication. But for theory, it's a strict no. I mean, it's fine if you don't have. Also, I just want to mention because some people have this doubt. So after applying for a PhD, you can always change your field. So first, you apply for a PhD in the field that you're interested in. You write your SOP based on that. But after your first year, you always have the option to choose the research lab that you want to work in. You can always change it. I think the professor might be a bit unhappy, but it's your decision. So some people have a question that can I do theoretical physics? Can I do computational physics? So you can just try to apply in the field that you are currently working in, and after that you can make your decision whether to shift. So just
Yeah.
understand that it's not necessary for you to stick to your field.
I'll add just like one line to that. It's something that the director of my program told me when I like joined in and during my first like one-on-one with him. He's like a world leader in network analysis, and he during our first one-on-one, I asked him this like same question. So that was the time when I was also considering a PhD for myself, and I was wondering whether I could like transition from like a master's in data science into a PhD. I later gave up that idea due to different reasons, but when I asked him that question, what he said was. People think that publications or papers are what get you into like a good PhD program. But in reality, a PhD program is actually meant to teach you how to write a good paper. And that's basically it.
Okay, that's good to know. So we'll take a few questions from the question box on the control panel. So Ashita, if you'd like to take over.
Yeah. Okay. So the first question is, does the reputation of a professor have a great influence? Example, moderate strong LOR from a professor in BITS versus moderate weak LOR from a professor in IIT IISc. So we can start with you, Pratik.
I think I answered something in the chat. I think the same question. But okay, I'll just say it again. So the suppose you are working in a field with the professor in IIT or in BITS, and suppose you are applying in the same field, then the reputation matters a lot. And I think, yeah, I mean, for my professor, he was the founder of this field that I wanted to work in, and so his LOR was really important. But if it's a different field, I guess the reputation of the university matters, and the reputation of the professor matters to some extent, but not to a lot, because it's a different field. So the recruiters, sorry, the admission committee wouldn't really, uh, wouldn't really care what work you have done with that professor. It's basically regarded. It's basically related to your field. Sorry about that.
So anything you would like to add, Abhijit?
I answered it in the chat too, but basically, as far as I'm concerned, I think most important is the fact that the letter is really personal to you. So rather than like a generic letter from like a superstar at the university, I would prefer a very personal letter with some personal anecdotes about me from like an assistant professor. So I think that's what they look at. So a lot of what Pratik said is right. If it's in like a hardcore research field, then maybe it's a professor who's like a rock star in that field, that totally matters, even if it's like general letter, I guess. But otherwise, if you're looking at the general space of things, I would totally, I would totally put the personal aspect of the letter above designation, unless there's like a huge gap in designation. Like this one person is like someone like nobody knows, but the other person is like famous all over the world and everyone would know their name. Then sure, I probably go for that one. But otherwise, I would definitely stick to someone who can talk about me more personally because that's what will make your application stand out more from like a sea of other generic applications. So I talked to my professor at Harvard after like maybe 6 months into the program, we were like discussing about the application process and everything. And apparently, she was mentioning that it's really important to choose your recommenders wisely because this this one person's application had a recommendation meant for like a job application at some company instead of like a Harvard MS application. Okay, and apparently the person who gave the recommendation was supposed to be like this big shot in the industry, but they sent in the recommendation for the wrong purpose. So that like completely defeats the purpose. So you need to be able to like trust the person, you trust your recommender to give give a good recommendation. And I think the personal relationship you have with them matters for that.
So the next question I have is for Varun. If I want to work in the industry after my master's, should I prefer a thesis-based or course-based master's, focusing on mechanical engineering?
Okay, so I think I answered this on the chat, but I'm gonna reiterate. So it definitely not a thesis, right? Because you can design. I think most universities will help you design the thesis you want to. Though all you need to do is some kind of proposal, right? And find an advisor like, who's working in the field of your interest, and you can actually make it very industry oriented. You can make it very experimental, hands-on, if that corresponds to what industrial means. I'm just speculating because I personally did not do a thesis. At Stanford, there's no requirement to do a thesis. I think it really matters because then you have this capstone like project that you can really talk about when you are interviewing with companies or trying to sell yourself to an employer. Is if you make it something that will be valuable to a targeting, right? It's going to actually pay off a lot. So if you want to go into industry after masters, I wouldn't be too worried about whether it's a course based or if it's a thesis based program. I think once you go there, you can, even if it's a course based program like Stanford, I did research for 1 quarter under a professor. It was more just like a simulation kind of research, but I could talk about it and I could have worked even longer if I wanted to and made it into a thesis. So you always have that option. You don't have to, there's no choice making that you have to do here. I mean, yeah, that's about it.
So I'm not sure if you've answered this question in the chat or not, but do these edX and online certifications offered by the top colleges actually help out in admits? We can start with Abhijit.
I did type in an answer, but the gist of it is that well, in general, no. Like if you're expecting that to like boost your profile forward compared to like everything else, my answer would be no. But one interesting case where that helps us, whether there's like a unique requirement of that one program asks for that you don't have. So for example, my program's requirements were like undergraduate level courses in I think linear algebra and like multivariate calculus and everything. So in our case, I think we cover all that in our BITS curriculum. But if there is some kind of like requirement that some college asks for that you don't have, then that won't be like a hard no. Like they won't tell you that okay, you don't apply because you don't have it. But if you have something else to show for it, where these online courses and these certifications and specializations would come in, that can it's up to the admissions committee to make that decision. But it totally can help you as like a replacement. But otherwise, I don't think you should depend on online courses as like a way to boost your career. It's a good way to show interest for sure. And that'll be like, okay, this person has put in some effort, but it's not going to get you all the way. I would say, well, again, I'm talking from like a pure data science perspective. So I would say use those online courses to like learn and get some good knowledge because they're like very structured and they're like everything in one place and it's easy to like follow them and get the knowledge into your head and then pick up like some individual projects even on your own. Like if you don't know what to do, just do some courses, gather some knowledge to start with, and then just pick up like a random public data set you get online and just start exploring. And if you don't know what to do, just start Googling like exploratory analysis or something, and one by one you'll unfold what you're supposed to do. And that's definitely the way to learn. So I would say use online classes as like a stepping stone and not like something that'll get you all the way.
Okay. So I guess I'll ask the last question to Pratik. Could you please share what kind of a profile did you have while applying to CERN or UCLA?
Okay, so uh, before applying to CERN, I just had one internship in accelerator physics, which was in Delhi, and that was a 1 month internship, so it didn't account for a lot. I also had 4 projects at that time, and those were in very different fields because I was just exploring at that time. So one was in computational neuroscience, one was in transmission lines, two of them were in neural networks. So it was kind of a very diverse set. I think what helped my application was the transmission lines project and the IUAC internship because both of them were related to the field that I was applying. Yeah, that's what helped my profile.
Okay, so Rohan, you can continue with your set of questions. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll ask a few more questions and we'll wrap this up. So, what is the timeline that you all followed while in terms of preparing for GRE or say applying for universities? All of you all can take this.
I can go.
Maybe, yeah, Varun, go ahead.
So I decided to apply for. I decided that I want to go for a master's in 3-2. I was absolutely sure at that point. So I did my summer internship at IIT Madras, and after third year, and that was the time when I prepared for my GRE and TOEFL. Immediately after I finished my summer internship, I gave both of those exams, and that was it. I never gave them again. And as far as I think the majority of your timeline will go into thinking about where you actually want to apply, right? I think I spent a few months on that. I think it was helped by the fact that I was anyway doing a lot of research on professors and labs when I was applying for a thesis. And I think that helped me kind of filter out the most of the universities. I do not have any particular preference of which continent or whether it's Europe or US. I don't have any preference. I just looked at the courses being offered, job opportunities around that area, right, and the professors, the credibility of the professors, their research, and basically the entire the combination of all of these with respect to the field that you're interested in, right. I think that helped me filter out universities down to 8 or 9, right, and I think I came to that set by the end of my summer internship, right? So that was in July or August, I think. Yeah. And that's when I went for my, that's when I departed for my thesis. And I think then the next few months while I was doing my thesis, I was constantly, I started off with a draft SOP. I was constantly improving it. I think your seniors are your best friends at this point, right? You want to get them to give you recommendations, give you even spell check, like something as simple as checking the grammar. I actually reached out to a guy in reached out to my friends in Dodgema and LDC who are really good with all this, and they kind of revised my SOP down to the T. Right? I think this was an iterative process that happened for 2 months, and this was also the time when I was so August and September. This was also the time when I was reaching out to my recommenders. I was prepared, like I'm applying for these many number of universities. Will you write me a recommendation? And that's more important because that's not under your control as much as the SOP. So you need to get on top of that, like getting all your vendors conditioned, like informed that you are applying. These are the deadlines. I created a Google sheet. I shared with all my recommenders. These are the deadlines. These are the portals. These are the links you need to hit to go and submit the letters. Right. So I was really on top of that because that's something that is unpredictable.
Right.
And yeah, most of the deadlines were in November and December for the universities I applied to. I think by then I was happy with my SOP. I had gone through several iterations. Luckily, all my recommenders were on board, except for the one at IIT Madras who actually refused to give me a recommendation. That was pretty. I was pretty surprised by that. But luckily, I had uh, recommenders in BITS who knew me very well, so I was able to get 3 recommendations. I think 3 is the standard for most universities.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about it. After that, you just wait for the admits and then you hope for the best.
Anything to add to that, Pratik or Vijay?
I'll
Pratik should go
start.
first,
So,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. So I was completely unsure about doing a PhD, but I was just interested in my field. So I was like, let's just keep that option open. And so in the winter of I think my third year, I was planning on doing a thesis and writing emails to my professors. And I also decided that after my third year, I will give my GRE. So, okay, I gave my GRE and I also applied to give the physics GRE and TOEFL in US because my thesis was confirmed by that. So, so it was just like I just wanted to keep that option open. And so I just applied for them and I gave the physics GRE in USA and I turns out I got a good score. I got a score about 850, which was reasonable. And I told this to my professor there. After that, after that, it's all in the it's sorry. After that, the only thing that you have to do is write the statement of purpose and getting the letters of recommendation. So I mailed the BITS professors and my professor at IUAC for the recommendation, and I had one confirmed letter from my professor at UCLA. That is all, and I mean, I did my statement of purpose right by the deadline, so I didn't really have time to send it to other friends to look at it. But I just had like one or two friends go over it, and yeah, that's what I did for the statement of purpose.
Okay.
But I was just applying to 3 universities, so I didn't have to really plan that far in advance. That was, I mean, it wasn't really a difficult process for me. It was very fast.
Correct.
Okay, Abhijit can.
Yeah, Abhishek.
Yeah. So my situation was like a bit different from what Pratik and Varun, especially because I wrote GRE and applied after graduation. Uh, I started working in July 2015, and by the end of 2015, by like November 2015, I was kind of sure that I wanted to apply for an MS in like data science or like data in general, whether it's like business analytics or data science. Um, and then, as I said before, I was juggling a lot of different positions at the same time with like my work-life balance was very questionable in those 2 years, uh, which is very unhealthy. Like, don't do it. But at that point, it was like necessary. Uh, so because of that, I did not really want to give up something just for studying for GRE because that's not something I really wanted to do because that's also not something that I want to write in my SOP that, hey, I dropped this position because I wanted some time to study for GRE. So because of that, typically people, I've heard that people take like 2 months to study for GRE, like kind of in a very organized fashion. But since I wanted more time, since I wanted to be more relaxed about it, I took like 4 months, 4 months or something. So basically, I started in February 2016, and then I gave my GRE in July 2016. So there were situations where I would study a lot for like 1 week, and for the next 2 weeks, I didn't even have time to like even touch anything. So and then I restart again after 2 weeks. So it was like a very unorganized and a relaxed way to do it. Again, not something I definitely recommend, but it was something that worked for me at the time. And then I gave my GRE in July, and then I gave my TOEFL like 1 week after that. I didn't really study anything. I was like, I think my program at Harvard wanted like 110 plus on TOEFL on 120, which was like a bit scary. But by the time I gave GRE, I was like, I'm done. Like I can't do any more studying anymore. So
Yeah.
whatever it is, I'm just gonna do it. And I gave, and thankfully I got like a really good score. I still don't know how that happened, but it went very well. Uh, but and then after that, I started preparing for my SOP. I spent like 2 to 3 weeks or maybe close to a month preparing like an SOP that uh, an SOP that sort of like I use for almost all of my program applications except the Harvard one, and at least like a template. And I used to, so like Varun said, he went to like his LDC and Dashma friends. And as someone in Dashma, I used to be the person who would like edit other people's SOPs back then. So
Yeah.
that experience sort of helped me write my own SOP when the time came. And I still had like other people read it. It's not like I'm perfect or anything. I still had a lot of other people read it and they gave me some really valuable feedback. When it came to the Harvard application, one thing that really helped me is that through my through my nonprofit. So I was involved in a nonprofit that works in like gender equality. Gender equality is like a cause I'm really passionate about. So there was this nonprofit that worked in the space of gender equality, like with data. Data was their focus, but the application wasn't gender equality. So through that nonprofit, I ended up meeting this grad student from no, it's actually a student from Yale. She did her like bachelor's degree from Yale, and she was in India like volunteering for like 6 months or something. And I so that was also at the time when I was like applying that I met her, and she actually helped me like read through my Harvard SOP and sort of give me like pointers on, hey, you might want to write it this way, because she grew up in America and she knows what they're looking for and everything.
Yeah.
So that really helped frame my thought process properly with like what they were looking for, because I knew what I wanted to say was valuable, but I didn't know the best way to say it, and she really helped me put things into perspective. And then the LOR happened right after that. I knew literally like one professor in BITS personally, and that was because I was like a POM TA, like Principles of Management TA under him.
Okay.
And he was like the only person I knew personally in BITS and Harvard. And I like most of the universities ask for like at least one academic reco. And I was like, well, that's a natural choice. Like there's no one to even think about. So I went ahead and asked him, and he was like totally okay to do it. And the other ones came from the people I've been working with in like some project or the other. So all this, all after GRE, all this happened in the next 2 to 3 months when the first application deadline started coming in, and I just took it from there.
Okay, great.
Okay, I just want to add to that one
Go ahead,
thing.
Pratik.
I mean, obviously the statement of purpose and the letters are important, but it's also important to plan in advance, because in my case, the physics GRE only occurs one time in India. It only happens in November, and you have to plan in advance to take it. For me, I got lucky because I was doing a thesis in US, and so I had the opportunity to do the physics GRE for like I had 3 dates in the US, but in India there is only one date. So please remember to do that on time, and yeah, that's important.
Okay, so I'll take one last question and we'll wrap this up. This question is meant for all of you, and I'm pretty sure all of us will gain a lot from it. So, what can a student right now, maybe first year, third year, fourth year, do right now in this lockdown to be better prepared for a future in these fields? Like, not necessarily masters, but just to be better prepared for the field. So if you could start with Varun, maybe.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'll go year wise. I mean, this is mostly things that I would have changed about myself, I guess. So if you're in your first year, I would say, um, I mean, you'll need a lot of hand holding when you're in your first year. I think at least I did because you're not really aware of all the things that's going on in the world in your field, and you probably don't even know what you're interested in. So as far as possible, explore, right? Join a technical club, join anything. If you feel you're remotely interested in something, just join it. Get to know people in it and talk to people. Because I think that getting to know people who are your seniors, who have explored more than you, who are they probably committed to certain fields, from them you'll probably, and that's your best attempt at getting to know what lies ahead for you in future. Right? You can't experience everything. You need to develop that network, and I think joining any club or department, it doesn't have to be a technical club. It could be any department or club, and getting to know your peers, your seniors. That's a great way of exploring, right? Trying everything. You can't do everything, of course. Maybe at best you'll be able to give decent amount of your time to maybe 4 or 5 clubs or departments. I think that's the most you can practically do. So it doesn't matter. Get to know, make a network. Right in your first year, try different things, and the same applies to your second year also. I think if you are not really sure about your passion, and I wasn't for a long time, you just keep exploring, and I think after a point, then when you get interested in, like, I started leaving clubs when I think in second or third year I was just in aerodynamics club, and I think spree, and I was playing tennis. That's all. I think there was 2 or 3
Yeah.
things I did, and I focused on them. I think after a point, then I would think about as Abhijit mentioned, maybe do an online course and then use that online course to supplement some project you're doing on campus, right? So maybe you have a team, or you have decided to do some project, or you're interested in, or you may be doing a DOP, an LOP, or SOP. Try to make the most of that, right? I would say this is a time when you probably, on the back of your mind, you'll probably be thinking about, okay, I need to build my resume now, right? Because by the time third year comes, you'll be applying for, if you're going for a thesis, you'll be applying for that. Or maybe for a PS2. Do they check resumes for PS2? I have no idea.
I'm not sure.
Maybe, yeah, maybe they do. I don't know. So at that point, maybe you'll implicitly be thinking about, okay, how can I improve my resume, and what kind of things, what projects are relevant to my interests. So by the time you're in the end of your second year, third year, I would be more focused, right, on the field, right? And it's still okay if you're not sure about what you want to do. It's still okay. Right? You can still be in that exploration phase. You can try different things, but go more into depth in what you're trying to do. Right? Don't just hit like a high level kind of idea on all the topics you're interested in. Like, go into depth in one thing, commit to one thing. I think by third year, you should try to do something like that, right? And I guess up after that, I think it's just then everybody has their own story after that. After that, it's just what you are focused on, what your life is, and what choices you make. And yes, that's what I would. That's my advice.
Great to hear that. Pratik, if you could add to this.
Yeah, it was a really good answer. So I would say the same, like explore your opportunities. Like in your first, second year, you have that option to do that exploration. You have that time to do all that. But after your third year, you have to develop some focus in one field. For me, fortunately, I had 5 years. So I still could make my decision after my third year. But for people who have like a single degree, you need to start making your decision by your third year. And I mean, you can always change your decision, but it's good to go in depth with your projects. Like, okay, go into the depth. If you don't like it, change it later. But it's good just to like, because it increases your knowledge. You become more knowledgeable in that field, and after that, you can decide for yourself whether you want to do that or not. Like for me, even just doing those internships at IUAC and RAC were really helpful just to realize what I want and what I don't want. And I think in your third year, it's very difficult to make the decision because everybody starts coding, everybody uh, is applying to MS, everybody has made that decision. But if you haven't, then I mean, you need those internships just to realize what you want and not want. I also, in my third year, I think I made a pro and cons list, and I made like everything. I made like I could be a data scientist. I could be I could do something in robotics, and over there I mentioned that I'll do physics after 2 years because I was this I mentioned like after my graduation, after 2 years I'll do physics because I like it, but I'm not sure. But then all this happened, and it changed my decision to do a PhD. So things happen along the way, and the best you can do is be persistent in what you like and decide for yourself as you go along.
Great. Abhijit, if you could conclude with some.
Similar perspectives for sure. Um, I don't know how to talk about like the clubs and department scene when it comes to data science because it wasn't a thing when I was in BITS at all.
Correct.
But I'm guessing there are like ML specific clubs and stuff at BITS now.
No,
I'm
not
sure.
yet.
Really? Oh God.
Yes.
Okay, someone should start it.
Yeah.
Um, so when you're in first year, as someone said, it's a lot of hand holding and you need a lot of guidance as to like what you need to be looking into. Unless you're some like whiz kid who has done all this in like high school itself. There was this kid at Harvard who already did all of his undergrad credits at the University of Minnesota in like high school, and then like came into Harvard for like his second bachelor's degree with the Harvard name. So that's like crazy. So, but unless you're like everyone else, unless you're like me, if you're like me, then you totally need some hand holding for sure. So I would say the first year or the first maybe like couple of years focus a lot on like gaining the knowledge. Online courses are definitely like a good place to start. Uh, I would say there are like Coursera definitely helps a lot. There's like a data scientist toolbox specialization on Coursera.
The John Hopkins one, I
Yeah,
think.
that's the one. It's
Yeah.
actually really, really good for like a start. If you want like just start off, it's really, really good. The important thing to note is whenever you're studying something in data science, it's really important to know why exactly you're doing what you're doing and how exactly a particular algorithm works. Because you can always like call a package and get something done. But when it comes to like interpreting that result or knowing how exactly to improve that result, you kind of like need to know how exactly the algorithm works to sort of polish it and take it forward. So it's really important if you something as simple as, let's say, linear regression. Let's say you're understanding linear regression for the first time, and you call this LM function, which are working in R, you call this LM function, and it gives you like this magnificent result with a lot of numbers in it, looked really fancy. But then if you don't know how to interpret that result, if someone asks you, okay, how good is this result? And that accuracy is not enough for me. I want
Mm.
5% higher accuracy. How are you going to get me there? You really need to know what you're going to do for that. And for that, it's really important to understand it. So when you're studying something, you're looking at like online articles, or when you're looking at some kind of Coursera courses, if you're not understanding clearly how exactly an algorithm works, I would say like pause it right there, exactly right there. Go to like a new tab, look up, read articles specifically about that algorithm, understand why they're doing what they're doing, and then go back and continue. And in third year, I would definitely agree with like what Varun said. Like if you have SOPs or COPs or LOPs or something, some kind of like a proper research project that you can do with all that knowledge you've gained so far definitely helps. Um, Especially if it creates like an actual impact in the research community is like really, really valuable because data science, as much as data science is like a very industry oriented field right now,
Yeah.
there's also like a very strong research component to it, especially like if you wanting to get into like an AI field. So right now my role is in AI and it's in applied AI specifically. So my job profile is not to like create new algorithms or methods or anything. But it turns out that for this one project that we are working on right now, there was like no existing way to do what we wanted to do. So we ended up like creating our own way to do it. And we're sort of like, making that into like a research project, and we're probably like applying for like a patent and everything on it. So such things can also like come out of it. So if you have like a strong research background already, even if the role you're getting into is not research specific, it can definitely still help. So research projects can either be like really good or maybe it can like not matter as much, but it's never like a bad choice to do research, is what I'm trying to say. Uh, and then going forward, yeah, if you're really sure about the data science as a field, then try to make all of your engagements, all of your PSS and internships closer to data science as much as possible, if not like directly in data science. If you think that what you fell into is not data science, just try to like go out of your way to do something or the other in it. Don't compromise your work-life balance too much like I did, but it's okay to like take an extra step along the way to get to what you need to. So that would be my roadmap. If I had known what data science was when I came into BITS, this is what I would have done.
Great to hear that, and I'm sure the session has been really, really useful. Thank you to all of you. I'll pass it over to Ashita to conclude.
Yeah. So with this, we come to an end of our BITS2MS PhD session. Thank you so much, Abhijith, Varun, and Pratik for sharing your journeys with us and clearing all the nagging doubts in each aspirant's mind. And thank you all for attending this talk. We hope that it proved to be insightful and will help you achieve your dreams. Please fill up the feedback form that we put up in the chat box. Your suggestions are very valuable to us. And good night and all the best. Thank you.
If anyone has like any one-on-one questions for me, just feel free to like get my contact from anyone in the organizing team and reach
Yeah,
out.
for sure.
Yeah.
We'd be happy to.
Yeah, same from
Yeah.
my side. I think I'm not able to address everything right now. I think I
So
probably,
it's a lot of them.
but yeah, definitely reach out to me on my email or whatever. Okay,
Yeah.
everybody.
It's good for specific questions if you can directly email us. And thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah.
Thank you so much.